Welcome to 279W Windows Server Administration. I am your instructor, Robert McMillen, and we're going to go over the very first Module 1 presentation, and then we're going to go through all the different presentations in each subsequent video. After the presentation is over, I will go through the labs just so you can get a feel of how these things should be set up if you're having trouble following just the directions on the screen. And also, of course, you have the book as well, which will help you get through the labs. So let's take a look at our objectives. So we're going to look at the network operating system, Windows 2008, and the different editions, virtualization, what that is, OS troubleshooting tools, Server 2008 installation, and domain versus workgroup. So a network operating system, what is that? It's an operating system designed to allow shared file and printer access among computers in a network. It includes the TCP/IP protocol stack, and that's how the computers can communicate with each other. And it also implements security via user accounts, passwords, rights, and permissions. So if you don't have the rights to something, then you're not allowed in. The different editions of Windows Server 2008. You've got the web server, which is the low-cost server for providing basic web applications. So if you're hosting a website, then this is the way to go. It's much cheaper than the other versions. Of course, there is no firewall in this particular version, so you have to be extra careful or put a third-party firewall onto the web server. There's lots of different ones out there. Server Standard, that's the one we're going to use in this class. And it includes domain services. It's a domain services operating system, and it is good for most regular-sized, medium-sized businesses, that kind of thing. You can install any application you want that is compliant with 2008, and it will do pretty much everything that a regular-sized business would want to do. Regular size would be anybody above 25 people. Server Enterprise, a robust solution for essential apps in large organizations. So what this is going to do, it's also going to give you the ability to do clustering, which allows you to have more than one server access the same data. So if for some reason a server goes down, then the other server will automatically pick up the slack and continue serving the users. So that's the biggest difference between enterprise and standard. There's also some other differences as well if you decide to put SQL Server or Exchange Server onto this particular enterprise box. We're not going to be doing that in this particular class, but if you ever need to do that, you will want to have the enterprise version on your server. Server Data Center is something that's for much larger companies. It requires a minimum of 8 physical server cores. And unless you have at least 8 cores, it's not going to work properly. So that's one step above enterprise. Virtualization. It allows guest operating systems to run concurrently on one computer and provide separate apps and services to client computers. You may be already familiar with that, but this is going to be a question that's asked as a test question in the quizzes and the final, that kind of thing. So you should be familiar with the actual definition of what virtualization is. And we will be using VMware. You can use Player or Workstation. VMware Player is the free version. Workstation is the paid one, but as a student, you are able to download that or use it at the Clackamas Labs. Hyper-V is Microsoft's native virtualization tool, and that may also show up as a test question for you. So Hyper-V is the one that comes with Server 2008. We won't be using that. We'll be using VMware, as I mentioned earlier, which will run on top of a Windows host operating system. The host operating system is whatever computer you're using, such as if you're using the Clackamas Labs computers, they run Windows 7 as the host operating system, and you put VMware on top of that. If you use your own computer, it could be Macintosh, it could be Windows 7, Windows 8, it could be a server version. Those could all be hosts to VMware Player. And then, of course, you put your guest virtual machines on top of that. So the number of virtual machines you can put into your computer is really based on how much hardware that you have on your host computer, how much it can handle, such as RAM, processing speed, and hard drive space. Memory can be allocated per virtual machine, which means you could set 1 gig, 2 gig, 3 gigs, whatever you want per your virtual machine. Now, for this particular class, we recommend you have at least 4 gigabytes of RAM, or aka memory, on your host computer, and all of the Clackamas Labs computers are compliant with that. So if you use your own computer, make sure you have at least 4 gigs of RAM, and assign 1 gigabyte of RAM to each of the 3 virtual machines. So you have 1 gig free for your host and then 1 each for your virtual machines. If you choose more or less than that, it may still work, but then again, it may not. So the advantages of virtualization: lower overall hardware costs, more efficient use of computer hardware, and it saves a lot of space. So if you can get a lot of different operating systems onto one box, you're going to save a lot of money because you don't have to cool it, you don't have to run electricity through it, and you don't have to buy a lot more boxes. So those are some great advantages. The disadvantage is the single point of failure. Now, this is not true if you use the enterprise version and you have the capability of failing over to another box. But if you use the standard version like we are, then that's definitely a single point of failure you have to be concerned about and plan for in case you do have a failure. You have to have a plan B to move those virtual machines over. Operating system troubleshooting tools, Windows diagnostic infrastructure. It includes an extensive diagnostic and problem resolution architecture that offers improved diagnostic guidance, additional error reporting details, expanded event logging, and extensive recovery policies. It can detect many types of hardware, memory, and performance issues, and can resolve issues automatically or help users through the process of restoring them. So what this basically means is that compared to 2003, Windows Server 2008 has a lot of different troubleshooting tools that either are enhanced versions that were in the older 2003 server or brand new ones that can help you troubleshoot problems. One of the new troubleshooting tools that 2008 comes with is also something you may have seen in Windows 7 or Vista, and now in 2012 and Windows 8 as well, which is the Startup Repair Tool. So it looks a lot different than it did in Windows XP and 2003. So the Repair Tool will automatically do a lot of different things for you. It can check for updates, disk test, disk failure diagnostic, metadata test, and target OS test, and it will repair any problems that it sees, and then it will automatically reboot your server for you. So you might see this happen even in your own virtual machines, which is one of the reasons why we're going to recommend that you do a snapshot of your virtual machines, because the Startup Repair Tool doesn't always work. And if you have a snapshot, you can go back to a previous step where the server did work, and then you'll be able to reboot that. When you install the server, there's a few different ways to do it. We're going to do the interactive setup, which is the default method, and that's where you walk through the setup step by step and answer all the different questions. There's also a way you can do it with an answer file. So if you create an answer file, which there is a tool to do from Microsoft's website, you can download that for free. You can pre-create things like the name of the server, the IP address, the domain, and all those different things. So you can just start the installation, walk away, and come back when it's all done. Unattended with Windows Deployment Services is intended to be used for remotely deploying different types of servers, and you can also do it with desktops as well, not just Vista, but 7, 8, and all these different things. So that allows you to push that out over a wide area connection instead of just doing it locally. And when you get your server, you want to license it properly, and a per server license, one client access license, or CAL, is required for each concurrent connection to the server. This usually means one CAL for every connection that is made to that server. Then there's also per device or per user, which is a CAL that is purchased for each user or device you're connecting to. Now, the per server is included in every professional version of the desktop version of your software. So if you get a Windows 7 or Windows 8, it already has your per server connection. But you have to also purchase a per device or per user CAL for each user or device connecting to the server. Now, this usually corresponds to one CAL for every user or computer that will access the. There are system hardware requirements that are requirements needed in order to install Server 2008. There are the minimum requirements and the recommended requirements. If your computer doesn't meet the minimum requirements, you will not be able to install Server 2008. If your computer doesn't meet the recommended requirements, you'll experience performance issues. So the minimum requirements are just needed to install the operating system. If you have less than that, you'll get an error message that says, hey, you cannot install this operating system unless you put in more RAM or have a better processor or more hard drive space. However, the recommended requirements are if you want the server to run optimally. So yes, you might be able to install it with less RAM or less processing speed, but if you do, then it may run slowly and you may experience some issues. So the recommended requirements are much higher than the minimum requirements as far as RAM, processor, and hard drive space. Couple different types of installations you'll be presented with during the install. One is an upgrade and one is a clean install. Now the upgrade is only if you have an operating system that it meets the requirements for the upgrade itself. So if you're running Windows Server 2003 32-bit, then you could upgrade to Windows 2008 version 1 or R1, release 1. But if you're doing to R2, you won't be able to do that because R2 is 64-bit only. So you would have to do what's called a clean install. And if that's the case, you have to make sure you back up all your data and then restore it afterwards. Otherwise, you're going to lose it all. So we're going to be doing the clean install because there's going to be nothing on our hard drives as we start. And when I say nothing on the hard drives, we're going to be creating a virtual hard drive, which is not going to affect your host hard drive, with the exception of it will take some space away from it. So it performs, you do a clean install, no user or system settings are retained, perform when current operating system cannot be upgraded, there's no previous operating system, and dual boot required to maintain old operating system. So there's another couple of options that you're going to have. You're going to choose either the full server installation or the server core installation. Now the full server shows the graphical user interface you're used to and allows you to use the server manager to install roles, role services, and features. It has the full interface. Whereas the server core just pops up with a command prompt, looks like an old DOS screen, and it allows you to install things, all by command line. So you're going to learn that in other classes, more advanced classes. You'll learn how to do the server core installation and how to run commands that you would normally have done through the graphical user interface. We will be doing some commands on the shell, which will mimic what you will do on a server core. But most of what we'll be doing will be through the graphical user interface, or the GUI. Computer naming conventions. Make sure that when you name your computers in real life, you keep them simple, keep them functional, and unique. You do not want to name a computer after a person, because if that person leaves, then you'll have to go and rename it again. So if your receptionist is named Sue, don't name the computer Sue, name the computer Reception. That is functional, meaningful, and it can be unique. If you have more than one receptionist, you could do Reception 1, Reception 2, that kind of thing. So domain membership versus workgroup. When you first install your server, it's going to be a workgroup type of a computer. We need to promote it to be a domain. So one or more computers are servers in a domain. Network administrators use servers to control the security and permissions for all computers on the domain. If you have a user account on the domain, you can log on from any computer on the domain without needing an account on that computer. There can be hundreds or thousands of computers. The computers can be on different local networks. Workgroup, which is the default when you first install, is all computers are peers. No computer has control over another, as opposed to the domain, where the domain controllers have control over everything. So in a workgroup, each computer has a set of user accounts. To use any computer in the workgroup, you must have an account on that computer. In a workgroup, you don't want to have typically more than 10 or 20 computers, and you want to be in an office where you trust everyone in the office, because since there's no real security, it's kind of a risk to have a workgroup instead of doing a domain. All computers must be on the same local network or subnet in order to communicate. Minimum requirements to be on the internet. So if you want your computer to be on the internet, you have to have an IP address. You have to have a subnet mask, a gateway, and DNS. Now, DNS is optional only if you decide to use names instead of IP addresses. If you decided if you knew the IP address of google.com, you don't have to put in Google. You could put in the IP address. So that's why DNS is optional. But of course, it makes things a lot simpler. So if you open up a command prompt and you type in ipconfig and hit enter, you can see that I have a computer IP address, a subnet mask, and a gateway. I also have version 6, TCP/IP version 6. I have the same kind of a thing, and we will be using some version 6 in this class. All right, in conclusion, we talked about what makes up a network operating system, 2008 editions, virtualization, troubleshooting tools, installation, domain membership versus workgroup. So let's go through the first lab. You can see here, this is the lab, same thing that you'll be looking at when you open up your Module 1 lab assignment. And here it is. So first you're going to install VMware Player or Workstation on your PC. You may already have it on there, or if you go to the Clackamas Labs, then you'll see that there's both of those on there. And it doesn't really matter which one you use, it just depends on what features you like. The Workstation one is a little bit higher end, so it has more features on that than Player, but it doesn't mean that it's any better. So the PC must be a 64-bit computer. So if you use your own computer, make sure it's 64-bit. Virtualization is turned on in the BIOS. You just reboot it into the BIOS and turn VTX or virtualization on, and then you'll be able to run your 64-bit virtual machines. Make sure your USB disk drive is formatted with NTFS, not in FAT. And if it is set to FAT, you can just right-click on the drive and go to Properties to see what it is. You can go to a command prompt and convert that particular drive from FAT to NTFS without having to format it. So by default, all drives are going to be NTFS on the C drive if they've been made in the last few years, but not necessarily the USB drives. So you want to start VMware Player, download Windows 2008 standard R2 from DreamSpark, or you can obtain a DVD, and you can get that from Clackamas. Or if you go to Microsoft's website, you can download a 180-day trial of both 2008 and Windows 7. You just do a Google search for those. So after you install Windows Server 2008 by booting off of the DVD or going to the ISO file, you answer some questions. You install the operating system, the GUI version, not the core. Delete all existing partitions when prompted. And on every single username that you ever create in this class, make sure that your password is the word password. So meets the minimum requirements of 8 characters, at least one uppercase, which is going to be the P, and at least one number. The O is going to be a 0. That's going to be your password. Don't use anything else because you will forget it. And in order to reset this, you'll have to start all over again. So always use password. Name the machine DC01. That's going to be the name of your 2008 server. And then you're going to configure it with these IP address settings. So before we get on to the next phase, let's just go ahead and do that. So here's our VMware Player, our virtualization software. I've already put Windows 7 on there, and I'm sure once you put Windows Server 2008, you'll have no problem with that as well. We're going to create a new virtual machine by clicking on that. And we're going to choose the installer disk image file, the ISO. So we're going to go to Browse, and on our desktop, I've already downloaded the Windows Server 2008 ISO file. So we're going to go ahead and click Next. We're not going to use a product key. So we can also put in a password. We definitely want to put in our password that we discussed earlier. If you don't do a password now, then you will have a problem when you go to promote the server to be a domain controller. Okay, you can choose at this point, the location, hit browse and choose your USB drive. I'm going to put it on my C drive because I don't have a USB for this particular class, but you want to put it on your USB drive only because it allows you to move the virtual machine from one computer to another in case your computer has a problem. All right, so the hard drive size, I'm just going to go with 25 gigs. We really don't even need that much. 5 gigs is plenty. And we can also store it as a single file or multiple files. Doesn't really matter. We'll just leave the default. And we'll go ahead and click Finish. When you boot up the image, if you get this particular error, it's actually pretty easy to fix. So it has the VMCI driver message. Just click OK. Close that. Now you want to open up where you saved your file. Where you saved your machine file, and that is when you first specified where you're going to install this. And then you find the .vmx file that's associated with it. You see there's a lot of different files in here. There's only one that's VMX. So you just right click on it and you choose Open With and choose Notepad. Or double click on it and choose Notepad from the list. Now, what you want to do is scroll down to see where it says VMCI0 present, and then change that in all caps to false. And you may have to do that with each one of them in case you have that problem. Most of you won't have that issue, but for those who do, that is how you fix it. So let's go ahead and double click on it now, and now it should start up. And there we go. Now during the installation, I will go ahead and fast forward so you don't have to watch that part of it, and just show you the parts where you have to make configuration changes, and it'll go much faster. All right, we're getting to the point now where it is copying all the Windows files, and once it gets to the bottom of this, we'll have some things that we can configure. Okay, after about 10 minutes or so, the server is finished installing, and this is the screen that comes up afterwards. We do not want to activate Windows. By the way, your installation time may vary based on how old or new your computer is. This is an i7 desktop, so of course it's going to be a lot faster. And you notice that the VMware Tools is installing. So it's VMware Tools allows you to move back and forth between the virtual machine and the desktop without having to press buttons to get in and out of the virtual machine. So we'll go ahead and let that finish up. Once VMware Tools finishes installing, it's going to restart your virtual machine, so don't panic. So one of the first things we're going to do once this comes back up is we're going to set the IP address and the other information for the server's IP information. We're going to rename the server to DC01, and we're going to reboot one more time, and then we're going to work on the Active Directory piece. All right, we're back up, so let's go ahead and click the little 3 box there for Control-Alt-Delete. Click on Administrator. It says password must be changed before logging in, so that's fine. We'll go ahead and put in the password. Same one we talked about last time. Password's been changed. Now we're logging in. If you're unable to find your mouse during this point, just hold down the Control-Alt buttons and then your mouse will come back. When you click inside, it disappears. Control-Alt will bring it right back. Now we are in our operating system, so let's go ahead and change our IP address. So first thing we want to do is go to Network, and we're going to want to go ahead and turn on Network Discovery. It's not for this particular lab, but we'll want it on for later. And yeah, yes, turn on Network Discovery. Now you want to click on the Network and Sharing Center. And when that opens, it will allow us to change our IP address. So click on the Change Adapter Settings. And Change Adapter Settings, you'll see your local area connection. Right click on that, go to Properties. Double click on TCP/IP version 4, And we're going to click use the following address. And let's go back to our lab real .quick. So we want 192.168.10.1, subnet mask of 255.3 and no router IP address. We don't need that particular thing, the router IP address for this lab, but you would normally put that in to a working computer. It defaults to the correct subnet mask, so you don't have to worry about that. No gateway. And then the subnet mask, the DNS, is going to be the same as the IP address for this particular server. So we're going to point it back to itself for DNS. Okay, we'll click OK. Now we'll double click on the version 6 IP address. It's easier to copy it and paste it in. And it's also going to be the DNS as well. Hit the tab, no gateway, DNS, Control V, paste it in, click OK, click OK. All right, so now our IP addresses are set properly. Now we're going to want to change a couple other things. First of all, we want to make sure that this thing does not do the download and update. So we're going to click on the change settings button, and then you're going to want to say never check for updates. All right, we don't need that for this particular class, and it just ends up making everything take a long time when you go to try to restart your computer. So if we go to Control Panel and we click on the large icons, click on System, then we're allowed to change the name of our computer. So by default, it creates this funky long name here. We're going to go ahead and click Change Settings, click the Change button, and from here we're going to click the, we're going to leave that as a work group, click the DC01. It's going to say you need to restart, and we are going to go ahead and restart, and then when we restart, we will start our domain controller setup. All right, we're back up. Let's go ahead, log back in again. And now we're going to promote our computer, our server, to be a domain controller. So let's go ahead and take a look at the directions again. We're going to go to Server Manager, and we're going to install all the files to become a domain controller by installing the Active Directory Domain Services role. All right, our domain name is going to be widgetllc.internal. And we're going to install the DNS server, the proper roles. You'll get an error mention about not being able to install a read-only domain controller. That's okay. And you also get a delegation message, which is okay as well. Okay, so if we click on Server Manager in the bottom left corner, click on Roles, Add Roles, Active Directory Domain Services. Click the button that says Add the required features. Click Next, click Next, click Install. And again, this may take a couple of seconds all the way up to several minutes, depending on the speed of your computer and how much RAM you gave your virtual machine, etc. All right, it's all done. Everything was successful. We'll go ahead and click Close. Now we're going to go ahead and open up a command prompt. We'll just open up PowerShell, and we'll type DC promo. And a new wizard comes up. We'll go ahead and click Next. Click Next. We're going to create a new domain in a new forest. If this was our second domain controller, we would choose an existing forest. But this is our first one. I'm going to call it widgetllc.internal. Capitals do not matter, but it just makes it easier to see the L's if you put them in capitals. And there's several things that we have to type in along the way here. First thing is the forest functional level. We're going to choose 2008 R2. And then we're going to leave the DNS server box checked, and then the global catalog is default because it's our first server. Second server gives you the option, but the first one has to be. All right, this is a normal message that comes up about delegation for DNS server. Just click yes. Choose the default folders. Click next. The password, this is if you have to restore from backup, is the same password as we always use. Next. Next. And then go ahead and tell it to reboot when it's done. When it's done, your server will now be a domain controller, and we can move on to the next thing. Now, once the computer is back up, you have to log into it a slightly different way. So before you would log in with just the username. Now you're logging in with widget LLC / username. Same password. But when you log in, just make sure that you have the widget LLC / in front of it, because now it's a domain controller, not just a work group. All right, so now our server has some additional features. So you now see Active Directory programs, which we'll get into in our upcoming labs that we'll be doing. So let's go ahead and minimize the server, go back to our lab, and when complete, you're going to look at the computer properties, verify the admin tools, the ones I just showed you, the Active Directory tools under Administrative Tools. Verify you can ping your IP4 address by DC, it's going to be 01, not DC1. And as long as that all works, we'll go ahead and do that one right now. So we'll just pull up the command prompt, ping DC01, and there's our version 6 address. And then if we type a -4, we should see our version 4 address. And we do, so it does work for us. All right, so now you're going to go ahead and create 2 Windows 7 virtual machines, the same way we did our 2008. And you're going to give different IP addresses. So the first computer name is going to be client 1. The second one's going to be client 2. So remember when we renamed our server DC01, the exact same place you'll see on your Windows 7 clients, you'll see the same place. You can go ahead and rename those Windows 7 computers. So client 1 will have an IP address of 192.168.10.2. Same subnet mask, but the DNS is going to point back to DC01's IP address. Client 2 should be 10.3, and the rest of the settings can be the same as client 1 after that. Join the computers to the domain. That's going to be done by going to Computer Properties, right-click on Computer, go to Properties, change the settings, select the domain. A new box is going to appear. Use your username, use your password, and then those computers will be members of the domain. So for your deliverables for this particular lab, you are going to screenshot the system properties of each of your 3 virtual machines. So you're going to right-click on Computer and then choose Properties on each one. So I'll show you how to do that real quick. So we're going to go ahead and minimize these programs here. So we're going to go to Start, right-click on Computer, and go to, let's try that again there. There we go. Go to Properties. And this is the screenshot right here. So it shows me that it's DC01. It shows me it's the correct domain name. And I know everything else on here is correct. I can also see the version of Windows. So screenshot this for 2008, Windows 7, Client 1 and Client 2. That'll be your first deliverable. Open Active Directory users and computers and screenshot and paste that in. So we go back to here, Start, Administrative Tools, Active Directory users and computers. And give me a screenshot of this box right here after it's been expanded. All right, open a command prompt and ping DC01 from client 1. So you're going to open up the command prompt just like I did here. You can, but you're going to do this from client 1, and you're going to ping DC01 from client 1, and then you need to make sure you get a response, and then just like the response you see here, screenshot that, send it in. Did you have any difficulties with the lab? If you, even if you had no issues, provide information on where you obtained this knowledge and what did you learn from this lab experience. So give me 1 or more paragraphs on that, and you can get yourself 100, and which I'm sure you all will do. If you have any problems, make sure you send me an email and I can give you a call and I can remote into your computer and help you out if necessary. So that concludes Module 1. I realize this is going to be the longest video of all of them. The rest of them will be much shorter, but of course it won't be quite as complicated either. So I look forward to our next module together.